A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Luke chapter 1 verses 57 to 66. Passage taken from the Message version of the Bible. When Elizabeth was full term in her pregnancy, she bore a son. Her neighbors and relatives, seeing that God had overwhelmed her with mercy, celebrated with her. On the 8th day, they came to circumcise the child and were calling him Zachariah after his father. But his mother intervened. "No, he is to be called John." But they said, "No one in your family is named that." They used sign language to ask Zechariah what he wanted him named. Asking for a tablet, Zechariah wrote, "His name is to be John." That took everyone by surprise. Surprise followed surprise. Zechariah's mouth was now open, his tongue loose, and he was talking, praising God. A deep, reverential fear settled over the neighborhood, and in all that Judean hill country, people talked about nothing else. Everyone who heard about it took it to heart, wondering, what will become of this child? Clearly, God has His hand in this. The Gospel of the Lord. Reflections on the Gospel according to Luke chapter 1 verses 57 to 66. God will not rest until He fulfills every one of His promises. Zechariah's unusual encounter with God was an answer to his prayers to God for years. John's birth was a sign of mercy that God showed to His people as Zachariah and Elizabeth experienced the extraordinary intervention of God. In the birth of John, meaning God is gracious, God's graciousness begins to enter into this world and to visit the humanity in need of salvation. John lived true to his name and prepared a people to encounter the graciousness of God. Each one of us is invited to play our part in the restoration of our families, strengthen our relationships, and remove barriers to peace and reconciliation, and thus facilitate the gracious visit of the Lord into our midst. The encounter of Zechariah with God's presence gives us a precious lesson. There is a time to be silent and a time to speak. Zechariah was struck dumb, contemplating in silence the mystery the angel Gabriel had told him. It was time now to break the silence and to speak, revealing the name God spoke to him in secret, John. Zechariah's family and friends gathered around him and asked a question: what will this child become? We know what did that child become. When God has given us life, He placed His life into us with a purpose, and indeed, God's hand is at work in us. It would be worthwhile to go into silence like Zechariah to reflect, what will this child become? What will I do with this life that God has placed into my hands? In our life too, there are times when we need to be silent, pondering in our heart in quiet contemplation what the Lord had shared with us, letting our unbelief turn into belief. There comes a time, however, when the silence needs to be broken, and we must speak to proclaim what we have been treasuring in our heart. When Zechariah regained his speech, his first words were in praise of God. Silence is all that we need to sing God's praises. Let us be silent before the great manifestation of God's love in Jesus' birth.